Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Social Media and Research Recruiting, presented by Elizabeth Buchanan. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available at the CITI program website. Now, let me tell you a little bit about today's presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Buchanan. Elizabeth is an endowed chair in ethics and director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. For over 20 years, she has been involved in internet research and the ethical and regulatory challenges facing researchers and review boards. She will be transitioning to a new position effective August 1st, where she will be the research scientist and director of research services at the Marshfield Clinic Research Institute. And now, let me pass the mic to you.
Great, thanks, Margaret. Thanks to Margaret and to all of my colleagues, Daniel and Jamie at CITI for assisting with the development of the webinar. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us today. And we're going to get started. I just would like to acknowledge I have no conflicts of interest to declare. And I guess I want to start with just a few heartfelt comments. We keep hearing the words challenging times, and I really just want to say I hope you and your family and your colleagues are all doing well and staying healthy in these indeed challenging times. What we want to spend our time today discussing is social media and research recruitment, which also present some interesting challenges. But particularly in light of COVID, we've seen our universities and our research facilities closed or paused, modified. We've had to respond with revised policies, and our practices have been put to the test at the very best. We've seen research projects stopped. We've seen things modified, gone from face-to-face settings, and have projects forced into a virtual setting. So it's really a timely topic that we're spending this afternoon talking about today. Yes, as institutions, we're all figuring out the best paths forward. We're reopening. That's been a huge area of discussion for IRBs and researchers. How do we move forward? I think it's safe to say that social media tools and these technologies that we're discussing today will certainly continue to hold a prominent place in our recruitment, our consenting, and conducting of research where appropriate. So with that, our goals today are threefold. We'll be looking at common types of social media research recruitment practices. We'll be identifying challenges and problematic approaches to using social media. And we'll talk about some best practices for researchers and IRBs for social media research. So what does this look like? What does recruitment look like? I'm throwing kind of a lot at you in this slide, but what I want you to take away from this graphical representation is the many ways in which recruitment can flow in these different online spaces. For many, many years, I've recommended that when a researcher is presenting an internet protocol, an internet research protocol, to include things like screenshots and graphics to really help the IRB understand those flows of data. And this is still something that I encourage researchers to do. So from the time a participant sees a recruitment ad to when that individual may be taking an eligibility quiz, to when that individual is reading a consent document, what is the direction, and what are the then privacy concerns, ethical concerns, regulatory concerns in those various spaces. Push technology. So as you see in the bottom here, you see the push technologies. Those are the things that we're very familiar with, our emails, our calendar updates, more and more frequently the text messages that we get. Those are referred to as push technologies. On the other end is the concept of pull technologies. That's an individual going out and actively browsing the web. And these are really starting to blend. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to go back to the push technologies just for a second, though, where we're thinking about a data distribution technology in which selected data are automatically delivered to a user's computer or mobile device in real time or at prescribed intervals. we're seeing that not just with recruitment, but we're seeing that in a lot of research right now, where researchers will have a message sent out to their participants, reminding them to take a treatment, or to participate in a survey, so that there is real-time surveillance of the topic of study. What I thought was interesting, I don't know if anybody had a chance to read this yet, but this morning I saw an article in today's New York Times. There was an article about the change in COVID data reporting. And they actually talked about the different push technologies that are being used. So if you have a chance, after today's webinar, you might want to look at that and think about that. So what we're talking about is when data are sent to the receiving party at the moment that they're generated, so that synchronous moment, that immediacy, the push technologies are then real-time transmissions. Okay, and so think about in today's environments, we're really seeing these methods blended and really combined in very, very robust platforms. So again, if we're talking about these push technologies and using these various recruitment methods, and we're talking about them now at the level of the government using them for COVID data collection, it's pretty important. Recruitment, as we think about those graphics that we saw early on today, thinking about recruitment from beginning to end, thinking about how a participant sees that initial posting to when he or she actually joins the study. We also want to think about those different times when data is in process. We talk about data in use, at rest, in transit, and then what's happening to the data. How and when is it deleted? We ask those questions, right? We want to know for how long will data be stored. We're at, in the cloud environment and in the big data AI environment, sometimes we don't know how long data will be stored. So that's something that we can address as well. We can say, for the purpose of this research study, I will keep the data for 5 years. Beyond that, we may not be able to control. We don't know certainly how long Facebook is keeping our data. So those are just some considerations. We talked about the idea of really using visuals, help the IRB, help each other understand how these social media protocols really look. What do they look like to the participant? How is a participant going to experience this process from beginning to end? And with that, just a couple points of summary that this can be an amazingly effective way to recruit participants for all types of research, from clinical to social behavioral, all across the board. We're seeing social media recruiting as a very, very viable option. But we all can be a part of responsible recruiting. We want to make sure we're complying with ethical principles and regulations.
We do have some questions, and I'll ask a few that we've received from the audience. Our first question: are there any regulatory guidance on this matter? And I think they're referring to social media research recruiting in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mentioned a couple. I would start with that Work Copernicus document, just because it has an excellent reference list, and they do cover both from the FDA and the OHRP sides of considerations. The regulations are around social media, particularly around internet use in particular. We don't have a separate set of guidelines. For example, when we got the revised Common Rule, there was definitely hints towards this new environment, but I think the revised Common Rule didn't want to get into the specificity of internet tools, et cetera, so it left it somewhat open that every 5 years or so there would be kind of a re-examination of the tools and technologies and how the regulations would respond.
Please visit the CITI program's website to learn more about all of our courses and webinars.